to criminals, the surveillance video, the horrified bank tellers.
I said, oh, son, if I didn't know better, I'd say that was you.
Mugshots instead of family photos.
He was the muscle with the gun, and I was the money guy.
His 18-year-old daughter in the getaway car.
It was my family. The loyalty was greater.
His guilty plea, the confession tapes that would shock even the police.
I'll lay it all out.
And a jailhouse confrontation, how he told his kids to lie to 2020.
You clearly told your kids to manipulate us, just like you were manipulating them.
A brother and sister reunion.
I don't want you to go.
I know.
You won't believe what our Mike picked up. And the father with the question you all want answered.
Do you think that you're a dad or a devil to these kids?
But tonight, a new angel for one of them, and it's one of you.
I said, this is wrong. She should not be in jail for this.
Bringing the daughter from jail to a new home, just in time for the holidays.
Here's your room. Make yourself at home.
A different version of keeping it all in the family.
Good evening and Merry Christmas. I'm David Muir.
And I'm Elizabeth Vargas. We hope you're having a wonderful holiday with your family. Tonight we have the story of one young woman, Abby Catt, who's celebrating as well after spending nearly 3 years in jail.
Locked up along with her brother and her father for robbing banks as a family. But someone at home who originally saw Abby's story right here on 2020 felt strongly that Abby was pulled into that family plan. So tonight, Abby with a new home for the holidays. Here's ABC's Matt Gutman.
Holiday decorations adorn the streets of Sugar Land, Texas, an affluent Houston suburb where you'll find the home of Susie and Stephen Gregory.
You wanted some black pants to wear to church, right? Yes.
On this day, they're bringing 21-year-old Abby to live with them.
It's going to look so pretty when we're done. It will.
This Christmas, Abby Catt decorates the Gregory tree as she prepares for a holiday without her father and brother, who are still behind bars.
We were very close and had a special friendship.
Abby's unusual family story started grabbing headlines more than 3 years ago.
It's an all-in-the-family crime spree.
That's dad in a mask and son in a fake mustache.
It was a family affair, all right. A father on an outing with his 2 kids, but they weren't out for fast food. They were hungry for a fast buck. These 3, the Catt family, didn't look like the typical jailbirds in the FBI's most wanted list. Nope, they looked like they belonged in your church group. The balding dad, his pimpled son, and the pretty blonde sister, still a high school senior. But apparently the family that stayed together robbed together.
Have you ever seen anything like this?
In my 20-plus years in law enforcement, I haven't, Matt. A family of bank robbers.
If news of Daddy's misdeeds bewildered local cops and journalists, it blew away their own family members.
Horrible, horrible. How can I wrap my brain around this?
The fact is they pointed guns at people. That's terrifying to me. My little nephew, who has the sweetest heart, has been turned into that. It's sad, so sad.
How could this have happened? We spent 13 months piecing together this story, talking to every major character. It begins where it ends, with Dad, Scott Catt. We met the father of this felonious family here.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Behind 2 inches of glass at the Fort Bend County Jail in Texas.
It is shocking to me because I've never been in trouble before.
That would be the first of many lies he would tell us. Back then, we couldn't have known this tale would have more twists than a knotted rope, especially given how Catt started life, with a homemaker mom and a dad who worked at the local bank.
Scott, he was so much fun. Great sense of humor. Always wanted to make us laugh.
Scott Catt fell in love and married his high school sweetheart, Beth, a champion swimmer. She called him her handsome cowboy. He became a structural engineer, and the all-American family settled into a 4-bedroom house with a front porch tucked into Oregon's wine country.
They both had great jobs. They both had great cars. They had the 2 kids. They had the dog. Everything that you work so hard to do.
Scott and Beth had everything until Beth was diagnosed with breast cancer. Her daughter, Abby, was just a baby.
The only memory I have of my mom, she was on a bright orange stretcher being carried down the stairs, and I remember her face.
So your first memory of your mother, your only memory, is one of her being carried away on a stretcher?
Yeah, That's all. But I hold on to it maybe as a good thing.
Because it would be the only thing she had. Beth Cat would die at the age of 32, leaving behind 4-year-old Hayden and 2-year-old Abby. Suddenly, Scott Cat was a widower, a single dad with toddlers.
How did you deal with it personally?
I didn't deal with it.
You were in denial.
Completely. I was in denial about needing help, about grieving, about depression, about my ability to raise them by myself. You know, I started drinking heavily.
While Dad was drowning his sorrows, the kids were thriving in the pool. The star swimmers were also decent students, and when he was sober, their dad was the proud president of the swim club. And the kids idolized him.
He was my best friend for a long time.
He was a whole lot of fun, loved water parks and Disneyland almost as much as the kids.
We were all screaming and yelling, and he went on all the rides with us, and that's cool.
So cool that he was really more a friend than a parent.
There wasn't really a disciplinarian. I mean, there was no one there hounding us to do homework or keep up our grades.
I knew it wasn't normal, but to me it was my normal.
Abby and Hayden, by this time young teenagers, soon realized Dad was fun, but they could only rely on each other.
We were very close. My sister is the only consistent thing I've had my whole life, and I'm the only consistent thing that she's had too.
Well, my brother's my best friend. He was basically the only one that was there for me.
I can just look at her and know what's on her mind, what she's worried about.
What Scott's kids were worried about most, their dad's drinking.
I lied to them about it. I told them I was going to quit, and I didn't. But I did do quite a bit behind their back.
And some of it in plain sight. There were arrests, there was brawling, disorderly conduct, and a new, more expensive vice, cocaine, he says.
I'd say probably 3 or 4 grams a week.
And the kids often found themselves assuming the roles of parents.
And there was times when on my lunch break in school that I was going to pay the light bill, and I picked up his clothes from the dry cleaners.
Scott partied away their savings. They went bankrupt. They lost their home. The lights went out. For a fresh start, and Scott says a new job, Cat traded the Oregon greenery for this scenery. An apartment in a Houston suburb with a whole lot of banks nearby.
Money was tight, and I was really depressed. That's when he approached me and said, would you be willing to do something to get some money more illegal than selling drugs? And I said, yes.
So you're 18 years old. You need money. Your father says, I have a plan to rob a bank. Shouldn't your first reaction be, are you crazy?
Looking back on it, I can't believe that wasn't my first reaction. To say, are you insane?
Why did you go along with it so easily?
I had a real struggle. I knew it was wrong, but I was really motivated by the money. The night before the first bank I was supposed to rob with him, I had kind of a panic attack all night, deciding, do I want to go down this path of evil, or is this not for me?
Ultimately, Hayden Cat would agree to walk down that path of evil.
He really wanted my help. In his mind, 2 people could be much more successful at it.
But maybe a third would be even better, and there was just one cat left to choose. Scott told Hayden to talk to his sister into joining their gang. She was a high school senior, just 3 months shy of graduating.
My dad sent my brother to ask me.
Your dad sent your brother to ask you?
Yeah.
To rob banks with them?
Yeah. And then the next day, my dad just basically laid it all out. You know, I'll buy you a new car, and I'll get you an apartment.
Could you have asked, well, why don't you just give me the money? Why do I have to be a bank robber with you?
No, I never asked. I mean, it's just, in some way, I was led on, like, this is how I protect them, and these are the only people I have.
Now, son and daughter say this is when they crossed over to the criminal side. A plan was in motion, the mark, the Comerica Bank, just down the block.
The morning of the first bank, I asked my dad, you know, are you the devil here to tempt me? And his answer is what really scared me. He said, yeah, probably. I'm asking you to rob a bank.
So he knew full well the world he was bringing you into.
The biggest point he made to me was the plan for all the details.
The details would have been what you've seen in the movies. The fake mustaches, fake guns, in hopes of getting real cash. But what the kids were really banking on was beginner's luck.
I was actually shaking so bad that the employees grabbed the bag and started throwing money in for me.
The family robberies. What could possibly go wrong? When we come back.
2020 returns with more All in the Family. Once again, Matt Gutman.
93-degree Texas heat. The Cat family wasn't headed to a water park, but to a stick-up in a small bank in a strip mall. The man with the gun was Scott Cat, and along for his first heist, his apprentice, his 20-year-old son, Hayden. Their disguises? Painters' masks and white overalls. Outside, waiting in the getaway car and communicating with the men on walkie-talkie, 18-year-old Abby.
Once we walked into the bank, then it was on. I was running on so much adrenaline and so amped that I wasn't even really feeling anything.
2 individuals walked into the bank, and they ordered the tellers and everyone into the vault.
He was the muscle with the gun, and I was the money guy.
Both men are big, over 6'3". Their sheer size and the gun enough to terrify customers. But it's a novice bank robber who's quaking in his boots.
I was actually shaking so bad that the employees grabbed the bag and started throwing money in for me.
In Hayden's hands, more money than he'd ever dreamed of.
How much does $50,000 weigh?
I'd say about 15 pounds.
With their garbage bag full of cash, they sprint out of the bank to the getaway car, which has been outfitted with stolen plates. The wheelman, a frightened teenager.
I was scared. I mean, it's just something you just like want to be over with.
And what was it like driving the getaway car? You know, it's hard because you want to obey traffic laws, but your adrenaline is pumping.
It was hard. I had them in my ear. My dad would yell at me to not drive fast, so I didn't.
Despite the heckling from her backseat driver dad, the reluctant 18-year-old gets them to their apartment, half-mile away, undetected. The heist had gone off without a hitch, just like Dad had promised.
Was there a woohoo moment?
Not till we got home.
With her sack full of 50 grand, the spending began. Cars, motorcycles, booze, and drugs. Abby's spending, much more sensible.
How'd you guys celebrate?
I went off on my own and just got my nails done.
In fact, the money came so easily and went so fast, within 2 months they burned through all their loot. Time for another bank job. The First Community Credit Union, just a few miles from the scene of their first crime. Before the hit, Abby cases the bank. That's her smiling and grabbing brochures from a bank employee. 11 days later, it's the same drill, new disguises. Ditching the painter's overalls for safety vests to blend in with nearby construction.
They walked into the bank with orange construction vests on.
Did you carry a gun in there?
No. We used a BB gun.
But it looked real.
Yeah. I remember a few people's face still.
What was their reaction?
Total shock.
Terror?
Yeah, they were scared, terrified, definitely.
Their take after 2 bank robberies, over $100,000. But the loot isn't exactly divided up evenly, according to the kids.
What percentage were they willing to give you?
10%.
Did you feel like 10% was enough?
Oh, yeah, because I never even had that much money. So
For your whole life?
Right.
$10,000.
It was enough for me.
Enough to buy a very practical used Ford Focus and more of those manicures.
I know the part that I played was wrong, but it was my family, and that the loyalty was greater at that point.
But her father and brother seemed more loyal to the cold, hard cash that was coming in and to blowing it fast.
Shopping, cars, partying, really nothing to show for it.
When the comforts of daily life include Jack Daniels, a new Chevy Tahoe, a Harley, and a swank new Houston apartment, even 100 G's can disappear pretty fast. And for the Cat family, that meant one thing: time to go back to work.
Had you planned another heist before you got busted?
Yeah, the morning they picked us up, I think we were going to do probably 1 or 2 more.
That day?
Yeah.
That's right, the Cats had gotten cocky, planning a pair of heists the day before their arrest.
It got to a point where I thought my father knew what he was doing so well that there's a risk involved, but the risk was so minimal.
But that would prove to be wishful thinking because, as we all know, where there are robbers, there are also cops. And the cops were already on to them. On the surveillance video from the latest heist, they picked up a detail that would impress even Sherlock Holmes.
The vests looked new. They actually had creases in them.
Because they were creased, you figured they were new. And because they were new, they must have been purchased somewhere nearby.
We were able to tie those two vests back to a local Home Depot. And those vests were purchased with a MasterCard debit card that went back to Scott.
By using that MasterCard, Scott Cat might as well left his calling card. And there's kids are using it in Home Depot to buy the gear they were about to use in a bank heist. It was just the break detectives needed, and the cats were in the bag.
When Scott was arrested, the detective that actually made contact with him told him, well, you're under arrest for bank robbery. And Scott's initial response to that was, which one?
They quickly arrested Hayden as well, who was up in the apartment. There, they found the kind of evidence gumshoes dream of.
In the apartment, we found some bank straps. And a bank strap is a little paper strap that wraps around a certain quantity of money. Usually it's 1,000 denominations. And it identifies whatever bank it is that it comes from.
And some of those straps were from a bank in an entirely different state. Suddenly, cops realized Cat is no rookie, but a bank bandit with a resume. They now had more than enough evidence to haul both Cats in for questioning, and authorities were zeroing in on Abby, too.
From my interviews with employees at the Comerica Bank, we knew that at least Scott was carrying a walkie-talkie and that those employees at Comerica Bank heard a female voice on that walkie-talkie talking to them.
Police had a pretty good idea of who that voice belonged to. The getaway girl Abby was arrested that day.
Abby called and she was yelling at me. I'm in jail and I need $10,000 to get me out of here. Get me out of here right now. And I said, you have to get that money from your father. She says, he's the reason I'm in jail.
Next, a how-to guide for planning a stick-em-up. The family's confession tapes.
Traffic laws and the getaways, everything.
Chilling detail of how they planned the robberies.
That cute blonde girl is the last thing you'd ever look for.
And coming up later, a first for a Texas jail. Brother and sister, the hug that broke all the rules. When 2020 returns. 2020 continues with All in the Family.
Police had nabbed Scott Cat for holding up 2 banks. He wasn't the only cat in the hot seat. Just down the hall in another interrogation room was his 20-year-old son, Hayden. Scott made it clear as he walked in, he was ready to come clean.
You know, I'll lay it all out. I'll lay it all out from the very beginning till yesterday.
Investigators were expecting to hear about the 2 heists in Texas, but they were about to learn that Scott Cat's secret life of crime dated back to the Clinton administration. He didn't even ask for a lawyer before he started spilling the beans.
First federal savings and loan.
For this head-scratcher, Scott actually needed a whiteboard to lay out crimes that began in his home state of Oregon, 2,300 miles away. It was like a seminar in bank robbing 101.
So this was number 1. This was number 1. I just went into the tellers. They just grabbed money, threw it in this bag, and I left. So I'd say I got about like $2,500, roughly.
We were able to insinuate to him that we knew all about what was going on in Oregon when, in all honesty, that wasn't the case. We didn't know about the banks he had robbed in Oregon really until the interview.
In total, Scott would confess to having robbed 5 banks in Oregon before even setting foot in Texas.
I can go in there and just slam it and be out.
I'm surprised he was able to, remain undetected, especially when one of the banks he robbed was in his hometown. You would think that someone would have known him.
In fact, someone did. It was Scott Cat's own mother.
I picked up our local newspaper, and on the front page was a picture of a man that robbed our local savings and loan, and that is where his father retired from.
He worked at the bank?
Yes. And I looked and I saw this frame of this big man, and I said, oh, son, if I didn't know better, I'd say that was you. And he grabbed the paper from me, and he looked at that. I remember so vividly, and he said, yeah, it does, kind of.
But a mother knows what her son looks like.
Oh, I know, and his hands. I know his hands. And Scott said, well, he didn't get very much money.
But her son was honing his skills, and you know what they say about practice. With each hit, he was banking more and more money.
That one I got close to 30 because by then I had figured out that there were 2 cash drawers, so I made sure that I got both cash drawers. I selected a bank based on accessibility and escape. How quick can I get in? How quick can I get out and blend into the rest of the world?
He didn't just see a bank and decide to rob it the next day. He would plan for weeks at a time.
How many of those did either Hayden or Abby know about?
None.
This was all just...
Not a one.
But growing up in Oregon, Abby and Hayden did know about the secrets Scott kept by the fistful in his dresser drawer.
He would keep an envelope full of $100 bills. I never really thought it that strange that he would keep a couple $1,000s in cash.
There was a lot of money in there, and it freaked me out. I've never seen something like that before.
That extra cash came in handy when Scott got laid off in Oregon. He says it was a job opportunity that brought him to Texas in early 2012.
Well, I had a nice chunk of money to come to Houston, and I blew it. Partying.
The cash tasted so sweet, Kat craved more, soon blowing off that job in Houston to focus on his more lucrative gig.
I hated the job. It was a really bad job. I'll just rob banks. I'm probably better at that anyway.
And in his new full-time job, he knew more help could mean more money.
This is where I started to, talk the kids in. Hayden wanted to come out here, and I said, well, look, there's a business proposition I have for you. I talked him into it.
A couple of doors down the hall, Hayden would soon fill cops in on his version of that dirty deal.
That's when he started, going over all the details about how it's done and what he's done in the past. Also, what to look for in a bank, Like what? The getaway is everything. I told him, I don't think that I can drive after my first one.
That's when we talked Abby into driving for us.
We just needed someone who was able to drive slow and steady and abide all the traffic laws and, not look like a bank robber at all. This cute blonde girl is the last thing you would ever look for.
But that's exactly who police were looking for. After getting a call from her dad, Abby drove herself in to talk to investigators. Same room, 6 hours later.
Well, I just felt like, I needed to do what I did to, protect them.
Abby admitted driving the getaway car, but said it was out of blind loyalty to her brother and her father, whose writing was still there on the wall.
My mother died when I was 2, and a lot of it has to do with, I've always trusted my dad. It's not okay, obviously, I'm not stupid. But when it's your dad, it's almost like it is.
I convinced her of it. She trusts me completely because she doesn't have anybody else to trust.
When we come back, how could he ask even more from his kids? Evidence 2020 obtained. A letter asking them to take longer sentencing so he could serve less time.
Where did you get this? It's your handwriting, isn't it?
Yeah, it definitely is.
You're even trying to manipulate them from behind bars. And us.
What do you want me to say to that?
Coming up on 2020. All in the Family continues on 2020. Once again, Matt Gutman.
The pretty house with the wraparound porch in Oregon is now in the Kat's rearview mirror. Their new home, where we met them 2 years ago, is the big house behind the bars of the Fort Bend County Jail in Texas. The family had been held in separate cell blocks and hadn't seen each other in over a year. Jailhouse life had taken its toll. Scott said there wasn't enough food and he'd lost more than 70 pounds, almost unrecognizable to his own mother when we showed her footage from our interview.
He's an old man.
$2,000 a week.
Yeah.
He doesn't look the same. Oh, I miss him. He's old. I don't want to see anymore.
She's heartbroken by what her son did to the grandchildren she'd helped care for after their mother died.
It's so hard. I wish I knew why he did this. I will never know.
When we sat down with Scott, he wanted us to believe he was a changed man, a father who would do anything for his kids.
If you were offered a deal where you had to spend 25, 30, 40 years in prison in exchange for both of your kids going free, would you take it?
For them going free? Absolutely.
What about life in prison?
Sure.
Scott Catt is a manipulator. He is a terrible excuse for a father, and no one would be here today except for the fact that Scott Catt decided a life of crime was easier than actually going to work every day and raising his children.
Would you have said you were a good father?
I thought I was.
Do you think you are now?
I have the serious doubts. I mean, I think that we're all sitting in here right now because of my inability to be a parent.
In fact, as we would learn, he would put in pen and ink just how twisted a parent he is. Abby's lawyer gave us letters from Scott in which he encouraged his own kids to do hard time so that he could do less of it. With this new information, we went back to confront him face to face.
This is your letter to Abby, by the way.
Where did you get this?
It's your handwriting, isn't it?
Yeah, it definitely is.
And it's your letter.
Yes.
You told me recently that you would be willing to spend life in prison in order that your kids do not spend time in prison. But here you are asking her essentially to do time for you.
I was trying to manipulate. I'm trying to get something.
Who are you manipulating?
I'm trying to get everybody something that they can live with.
Everybody, you got your kids involved in this. And you're asking them to do time for you. It says it right here. I do believe that you doing prison time will be good for me, and I know that wasn't an easy choice for you.
And that's what she said to me in the previous letter, that she was willing to do that.
Wouldn't most parents say, try to dissuade their children, say, please, don't admit to anything. I will take the entire blame here.
I would love to, but they have so much evidence on everybody that what are we supposed to do?
What's interesting is that you can't even leave them alone. It seems that you caused so much havoc in their life beforehand that you're even trying to manipulate them from behind bars. And us.
What do you want me to say to that?
In another letter, Scott encourages Abby and Hayden to exaggerate his addiction in their interviews with us, also that his story would appear more sympathetic.
Tell them I led a dual life involving drugs, alcohol, and women. We can F with them a little ha-ha.
You clearly told your kids to manipulate us, just like you were manipulating them.
I wanted to get some sort of movement on my case, something. It was a joke. I was joking around. That's the ha-ha part.
I don't understand the humor.
Well, that's the humor of somebody that's done a lot of drugs and alcohol.
He has done research on what would make them have a better story. So being a drug addict, being an alcoholic, your audience would look at that and excuse it and maybe feel sorry for him.
I did everything wrong. I wish I could take it back, but I can't. There's so many regrets about it.
Your father says he blames himself. He says he's lied to you for many years.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe him now?
Am I just supposed to believe him all of a sudden? I want to, and I've always wanted to. But I believe he feels remorse, but I also believe that he still didn't have my best interest through all of this, through all the court stuff. Does
it make you angry? Make you sad?
Mainly sad that a situation like that was put in front of my face from the person that is supposed to keep me away from things like that. And that's been the hardest to deal with because that doesn't happen to everybody. And I feel like now I've lost my mom, and now I've lost my dad.
When we told Scott his kids thought he'd failed as a father, he was dumbfounded.
Did they forget about all the times, the happy times, if they don't remember the trip to Disneyland? I wish I could have made those memories a little more lasting for them.
And unbelievably, despite everything, Abby and Hayden say they forgive their father.
I've forgiven him because I have to for myself, so I can start to live a normal life. I don't want hate, anger, any of that in my heart.
If your father were right here, Hayden, what would you say to him?
You know, I'd tell him that I forgive him and that I don't want him to carry this burden around with him for the rest of his life.
When we come back, an extraordinary television moment.
Abby.
Abby and Hayden reunite, and you won't believe what our mics picked up.
2020 continues with All in the Family.
They'd committed the crime. Now came the punishment.
A serial bank robber who disturbingly recruited his own son and daughter to help him during a string of holdups has learned his fate.
How do you plead to the offense?
Scott Katz's 15 minutes of infamy would stretch into 24 years of prison.
I mean, I'm 51 years old, so I mean, to me, that is life.
Texas penitentiaries are some of the toughest in the world, where prisoners have allegedly died from a soaring heat index of up to 130 degrees. Hayden accepted a deal of 10 years, a sizzling cell in Texas, a world removed from his suburban childhood in Oregon.
Well, what do you expect prison life to be like?
Hell. As close to hell on earth as you can get.
How do you plead to the offense?
Abby pled guilty and was given a 5-year sentence. Sheriff Troy Nels was so disturbed by Scott's manipulation of his kids that he's decided to help Abby. Instead of shipping her off to prison for 5 years, he's decided to keep her here at the jail, where we found her stitching patches onto police uniforms.
I just feel that she's more of a victim in this. So my goal is to try to educate her, get her where she can get her GED, and try to teach her some type of a skill set here. So when she gets out, she can lead a productive life.
For Abby, all she has left is her brother, Hayden.
Why does that make you sad now?
Because I miss him. I feel like I can't help him, and I can't comfort him, and that makes me sad.
Making an unprecedented gesture, Sheriff Troy Nels allowed us to bring them together one last time before they served their sentences. Brother and sister haven't seen each other in a year, since the day of their arrest. Hayden is brought in shackled, hand and foot. And the jailhouse rules were strict. No touching. The soulmate siblings couldn't seem to help, reaching out.
Abby.
Breaking one last rule.
Are you doing okay?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm just happy to see you.
Yeah, me too. Abby, I'm sorry, okay?
I don't blame you for anything, kid. Just know that I love you forever.
I love you too.
I don't blame you for anything. Nothing.
It's gonna be a long time until I see you.
I know. I love you.
I love you too.
Can I give him a hug?
No, I can't hug you.
No?
No.
And on the spur of the moment, we asked the sheriff for one more act of kindness.
If you guys want to give each other a hug, the sheriff says it's okay.
Really?
Oh.
It could be 10 years before Abby and Hayden could embrace again. Listen closely. Our mic's picking up Abby's heart, pounding.
It'll be okay.
I know.
It's just gonna be a couple of years until I can see it.
I love you.
Abby, I love you too.
I know. I don't want you to go.
I know.
and gushing out in the grief and the regret and the anger.
Thank you for the hug. I needed it.
I know.
I love you.
I love you too, okay?
Okay.
If you ever start to feel down or anything, just start to think about all those good times we had, okay?
Okay.
That'll get you through.
Okay.
All right.
I love you.
Abby, I love you too. I'll see you soon, okay?
Okay, bye.
And after 10 minutes of comfort, shackled again. The siblings' love for one another, the one thing their fool-hearted father couldn't destroy.
All right.
Next, an unexpected angel comes forward to help Abby.
2 years and 10 months.
I didn't think too much about it until we watched the 2020 show. I was just overcome. I said, this is wrong.
Stay with us.
Returns with more All in the Family. Once again, Matt Gutman.
While her father and brother were sent off to do hard time in tough Texas penitentiaries, Abby Cat remained at the Fort Bend County Jail.
I've been here for just over 2.5 years.
We caught up with her last summer. Her life behind bars, a far cry from her comfortable suburban life.
At first it was very depressing, but just adapt to it.
She used her time to study for her GED and worked sewing patches on uniforms and hemming pants. Had time changed her feelings about her father, the man who encouraged her to be the getaway driver while he and her brother robbed banks?
My love for him is unconditional, and it tells us that we have to forgive, so I forgive for myself, and he's my dad. And I love my dad. I love my dad before, and I love my dad after, and it's just how it is.
While she's been incarcerated, Abby's had no visitors. But on this day, her aunt and grandmother have made the trip from Oregon. They haven't seen Abby for 3 years.
Look at you. Oh, I love you.
Their visit is also a celebration.
Do you know how lucky you are?
Yes.
Okay.
She just learned that she'll be paroled in the next few months.
You've been given an opportunity here that many others don't ever get. You have many angels that love you very much.
See how you...
One of those angels is Susie Gregory, a married mother of 2 grown sons. She met Abby while volunteering in the jail as a sewing teacher.
I didn't think too much about it until we watched the 2020 show.
I believe he feels remorse, but he still didn't have my best interest.
And then I was just really stunned. I was just overcome. I said, this is wrong. This is just wrong. She should not be in jail for this. And I just felt like God put me in, that sewing room for Abby.
This past October, Abby was released on good behavior and under the condition that she remain in Texas.
So this is a big day. A new beginning. Go ahead. All right.
Waiting for her was Susie Gregory.
2 years and 10 months.
She's finally free and grateful for Susie's friendship.
I guess she just loves me. I don't know. Funny.
Abby is on her way to a house she's never been to, but one she'll call home, the Gregory's place, in an affluent Houston suburb.
Time to go home. Abby, this is your new house. And here's your room. Make yourself at home.
Cool. Thank you.
In the last 2 months, with the Gregory's assistance, Abby got a job at a fast food restaurant and is slowly rebuilding her life.
Susie has done a lot for me when I first got out, motivating me and keeping me busy on the things that I needed to get done. There we go.
It is a real joy to be able to do the work of helping Abby.
I don't think these are going to last long. Maybe just the night.
Susie's role in my life is a mother figure.
I hope I'm the mom that she never had. I hope I can be that for her.
Abby says she struggles with guilt about her role in the robberies and and misses her father and brother, but she says she needs to focus on the present.
I'm doing wonderful this Christmas season. I have a better life, a whole new life. Yes, I've been very blessed.
What do you think? I think it looks great. Awesome.
So, from a family drama that was almost unthinkable, at least one happy ending, as Abby now has a home and full tuition for a year of junior college, which she'll be starting.